Hello and welcome back to Thursday Morning with LindaZ. This is part 2, and today we're going to actually be doing the binding on our project. So I finished all the quilting after we were with you last week, and we're going to keep using this beautiful Janome CM17 machine. This is their top-of-the-line sewing and embroidery machine. We just had a wonderful event with Trevor Conquergood, who was here from Canada last weekend. And we've got a couple of these that are still at the price of the event pricing. And so if you're interested in having the best machine on the market that Janome makes, we've got you covered. So please give us a call and we can help you with that. So these two samples here are samples of the decorative stitches that are built into the Continental M17 machine, the Janome top-of-the-line sewing and embroidery machine. These are in the sewing side, so you can see how beautiful, how big, how bold, how gorgeous you can do your decorative stitching on the machine. So just wanted to give you that overview of how beautiful you can decorate your projects. So there you go. Today we're going to be doing the binding, right? So I've got the machine, a straight stitch plate on the machine. I'm just going to sew the last strip together. I'm creating the strips of my binding, and so I need a regular sewing foot on there first, and then I'm going to move over to walking foot on here. So first off, why don't we start the sewing? So we've got a half winter, half spring day outside today, so we're kind of a little bit drenched from the rain. It was kind of fun, but we are going forward here. We're here in the studio and we're doing fine. So here we go. We're going to let me show you how I did the first part of this. So I've got 4 strips of width of fabric. So from salvage to salvage, I have 4 strips of 3 inches wide for my binding for these the floor canvases. It's a canvas, so it's a little bit thicker. That's why my binding is a little bit wider than the usual 2.5, 2.25 inch. Sometimes there's people that bind their quilts with 2-inch strips. So again, we have from salvage to salvage on your bolt, 3 inches of this, so 4 pieces. So I've sewn together 3 of them already, and I've got one last one to do, and so I wanted to show you how I do that. So I've got my last strip I want to sew on here. So I'm going to do it at the diagonal. I'm going to bias edge this so that there's no additional bulk in the actual binding. So it creates less bulk by doing a diagonal stitch across this. So let me show you what it looks like when I open up one of these seams that I've actually sewn together. So I sewed my 1/2 inch seam allowance because that's what this project calls for, not a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I've sewn down the edge here, and I open it up, and you can see that when we fold that, if the seam had been straight, my binding, when I put my binding together, it would have been really thick. So I'm putting my wrong sides together to create my binding, and you can see that by the fact that we had the seam on a bias edge means that it is creating a V, so we don't have as much thickness in our binding when we go to actually sew this binding onto the canvas rug. So that's the reason that we have to do this. So let me show you my last seam so you can see how I did that on the other strips, sewing them together. So right sides pretty sides facing together. I'm going to be at a diagonal. I still have my salvages on here, so that's really great to have them on here because then I can see over the edge just to the width of my salvage there on both sides facing each other. So basically, and I've got this trick that I use myself when I'm sewing my binding together. Do I sew down this line or do I sew down this line here? And I like to consider this like across the waist of the 2 legs that are going down here, right? So I've got my legs and I've got my waist across. So I'm sewing across the waistline of my 2 legs. Okay, so that's how I do that. Bring my needle down, nudge my corner up there to my needle, and then I bring my foot down. And I try to line up so that I'm going to get to this bottom V down here when I sew across that. So just have so just to keep you up to speed here, I've got a Metrazine polyester thread because this is a canvas floor canvas that is going to be laundered many times and walked on and whatnot. So I want a really sturdy thread. And I've got the same 100 weight polyester thread, metrazine thread in the bobbin. So the upper thread and the bobbin are that 100 weight, 100/3 polyester metrazine thread. And I'm just using a white because it's not going to show. And so I've got just got that white color. My needle is just a standard universal. It can be here. I'm not doing any top stitching just yet. I will be, a top stitch needle would be good for the final step of stitching down the binding though. So you might want to, or a quilting needle would be fine as well. So, and I always like to use either 80 or 90 in my machine. So that's just a tip right there for you. So why don't we go ahead and stitch this last together here. And so just keeping an eye on where that V is going to be down here so that I come right out at that V. And that's all there is to it. So now when I open that up, I've extended my strip of my binding, which is great. And then I just trim off the excess fabric here at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then I've got my binding that I can just put aside for a couple minutes because I have to trim off the actual project over here first. So there you go. I've got my all my binding is ready to go. So I'll keep that here for a second. What I wanted to show you next is all the things you need to do this type of, this end of the project. You need a cutting mat. So that's what's down here on the table. You need a rotary cutter. You need some scissors, snippets, just maybe a little scissor like this to trim up some of the things that we've got going on. I like to use the By Annie tool here. It's an all-purpose tool, but it's got a really nice rough edge on this stylus here. So it helps me push my project through if I needed to or instead of putting my finger dangerously near the needle, this can be close to the needle. But obviously I don't want the needle to hit this either, but just keep the project flat and going through under the needle. We might need some clips, so I've got some clips ready to go. I do have some fabric glue from Quilter Select that I'm potentially going to use. I've also got from Floriani, Quilter Select actually, a 1/4 inch, gosh, what's it called? Sorry, I'm gonna get the box over here. It's called the Applistick. So it's the Applistick, and it comes in a box like this. So it's really nice. You've got the double-edged stick. We could use that to help us position our binding once we're ready to turn it over and stitch in the ditch to stitch that binding down later on. So this is where the fabric glue, this is the packaging of the fabric glue that's the Quilter Select, fabric glue stick. And it comes with one of the refills. And then you can actually buy a package of 4 refills if you are doing a lot of the fabric gluing. This is very helpful for this project. So if you ever do make one of these, it can be very helpful to put just a dab of that glue when you're putting your applique pieces down and auditioning them before you actually stitch them onto the project. It's nice to have them stay still and put where they are, even if we have already pressed them down with the fusing them with the iron. So let's see, what else do I have? I have a seam ripper because sometimes we need that. And I probably won't need it, but I like to have it in case I do need it. And then I do have a little ruler for when we're going to attach the binding together at the end, just to be able to measure that 3 inch, a little bit less than 3 inch space when we're going to attach the binding together. Okay, so let me put these aside so I can show you the next step. I did forget that you can use these to square up a quilt. You can use these larger rulers. These, unfortunately, the 18 by 18 we do have boxes that are large enough to ship the 18 by 18 Quilter Select ruler, but unfortunately we do not at the moment have 24 inch large boxes. So there's another one that would be really great for squaring up a quilt. And that is this 8 inch by 24 inch ruler by Quilter Select. And this unfortunately cannot be shipped. So if you're in the area of Chicago and you can come by LindaZ's, we welcome you to come in and try one of these out. They're really great for all kinds of cutting purposes for you quilters out there. These rulers are great. So I do have a 6 inch by 24 inch ruler open. And I started out a little bit for you guys so that I didn't have too much to go, because this is quite a long quilt. I could have used the 18 inch to square up, And sometimes, you know, if you need to pull a little to keep it, you know, get it straight, that's kind of what that's all about, squaring up. So I'm pretty straight now. I went through that process already. So I just wanted to show you how I finish off. So I cut off all the other 3 sides of the quilt already before we started filming. And I just wanted to show you, this is my last side, and this is how I go through this. So I take my ruler and I've got my rotary cutter, and I'm just cutting right along that edge. And so now the next step will be to add the binding. So I always like to start in a place of the quilt that is not going to be the first place that you would look at if you're looking at this somewhere. So I just decided I would start in like probably this area on the bottom of next to where the sewing machine is. So I'm going to start there. So it's like 2/3 of the way over on one of the long sides of my project here. So I take all this excess, all my strips here, one strip now, it's one strip. And I'm going to start by folding it wrong sides together. They do say to press it, but I don't press these. I just hand press. And if I really need to a help with hand pressing, I would use this pressing tool, which is part of the Bianni stylus. So it's kind of an all-in-one type of a tool. It's really nice to help press. So that's also nice. So I'm going to leave probably this much space of a tail, and I'm going to put my raw edges towards the raw edge of this quilt, and I'm going to take this over to the machine. So raw edges to the raw edge of the piece of the quilt, and can bring my needle down and my foot down, and I want to line up. So basically at the edge of this foot, so this is the A foot, my non-walking foot shank. I am going to do that again. Press the needle down, foot down. Okay, so that's a 1/2 inch seam allowance basically over the edge there. And I've got looks like my stitch length is at a 2.4, which is pretty good. I want to make this as sturdy as possible. So that's pretty tight stitch. And I am going to start sewing by moving just a few stitches first, and then going back stitching that same space, and then I'm going to start all the way around. So when I get to the corner, I'll show you how I do that bias edge on the corner. This is a pretty big project, and it is like going through like butter on this beautiful quilt, on this beautiful machine, excuse me. This Janome CM17 is gorgeous. It is incredibly powerful machine. I feel like I'm a princess working on her favorite tool. This is a great machine. Everybody really enjoyed it. And Trevor, we found out, is a Janome lover. He's been doing a lot of his embroidery all of his embroidery on the 7-needle Janome machine. And then his sewing he does on Janome machines also. So that was quite fun to be able to have him and Janome in the house last weekend, and to show the customers who were there how great this machine performs. We were making patches, so that was quite fun. Patches, you can imagine in embroidery, you're going through a lot of different layers, and it just goes through all of these layers. The only thing I'm hesitating about is matching up all these raw edges. That's the only thing I'm hesitating about here. And if I had clipped this, it would have been faster maybe, but we're doing okay. So far, so good. And the reason I personally don't like ironing or pressing these beforehand is that if I'm off a little bit, I don't want it to like bubble up, because it'll just be folded over where I sew it now. So it's not memorizing any fold per se. Okay, so here we are almost, so we're like 1.5 inches, 2 inches shy of the corner. Just wanted to show you that I did lessen the foot pressure because it was kind of pushing too hard on my thick project here, because this is a lot of layers I'm going through here with this thick canvas, 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of canvas and 1 layer of batting. So I lessened that pressure on the foot, and it's not rippling as much at all anymore. So that's great. So I put it at a 3 on my presser foot pressure. So now I'm going to go to about a 1/2 inch shy of the end. One more stitch. See how precise that is? It's incredible how precise that is. Just want to make sure that when I do lift it up that I'm at, nope, I need one more stitch because I want to be at just exactly a 1/2 inch below. So let me just do one more. And I think we're good there. Are we good there? Nope, one more. I'll get this right. I'm used to my 1/4 inch, not my 1/2 inch. Okay, there we go. All right, so then what I'd like to do is once I'm at a 1/2, and how I figure out if I'm at a 1/2 is I do turn it to make sure that when I am going to turn the corner, I'm at the edge around the corner. Okay, but first what I'd like to do is bring my foot down, and I'd like to go off of the quilt at an angle and just sew right off the quilt. Okay, so I'm sewing right off of the angle. So you can see that's what I just did, and I'm going to scissor cut, so I'm off. So I did my 2/3 of the side, and I'm off. So I'm going to bring this around to do my short side now, but I want to do my biased angle first. Before I do that, looks like I've got my dog ear to cut off here, so I'm just going to do that right now, just to make that flat. My binding. Okay, so I want to take this and I want to bring it as if it were going straight up, and my binding is at a 45-degree angle. I don't know if you can see my hand here. My strip is quite long. So my binding is at a 45-degree angle here, and then I'm going to hold it here at the edge, the upper edge, and I'm going to fold it down, and I'm going to bring it along the next corner, along the next edge, pardon me. So basically, I can do that again for you to show you what's going on here. I have my fold is along the raw edge up here, and then I've got a fold in here that is a 45-degree angle. Sorry, trying to hold that out of the way for you. So it's as if I'm holding that straight up my strip, and it creates a 45-degree angle from the corner. So I hold that down, and then I'm going to bring the rest of my strip down straight along that raw edge again. And that top fold should be still along that raw edge. Okay, so that's, and then these two folds need to match on the left right there also. So it's just a matter of getting that, getting used to how that system works. And then we're going to bring the edge over to the edge of my foot, bring my needle down, bring the foot down, and then start along the next edge, sewing. Same way as before. Actually, I'm going to grab my handy dandy tool here. It's a perfect opportunity to use it, as long as my quilt doesn't fall off the edge of the table. And I'm going to help it through by, I don't know if you can see what I'm doing, but I'm just kind of helping it through those first couple stitches. And I can back up a little bit on there just to reinforce that, and then go forward. See how easy that goes through that? I can't even count the amount of layers that just went through, like no problem. And that's why I love this machine so much. I do have its sister, the M8. That's also a very, very powerful sewing only machine that Janome makes. So here we are going down the one of the shorter sides. All the raw edges are still together. Okay, so we're at the third corner. Just want to make sure that I'm on where I need to be. And I'm going to stitch off the angle again, stitch off the project, and scissor cut. Bring that out. Do my last short side. Let's get the angle going again here. So I pull that straight up. Get my 45-degree angle. And then bring it down along the short side here. Oop, I've got another seam here that I want to. Okay, so I'm here at my workstation, and you can see I've got two tails, one on the right, and so I'm really close to the end of my fourth strip of the 3-inch strips that we sewed together earlier. So that's perfect. So what I'd like to do is, I can see I've got about 8.5 inches. Sometimes people are a little bit wider in the opening than 8.5 inches, but I should be able to do just fine with that opening. So what I did was I marked with just a marking pen. I marked the center of my opening, so I know where that is. And then what I'd like to do is on the right of that and on the left of that, so I'd like to trim to the right of that, this strip coming this side at about 1.5 inches. So I've got my my tape measure here. You could use a ruler, you could use whatever you want. I was just putting so what I want is about 3 inches of overlap, because it's based on the width of the strip that you have. So I've got a 3-inch strip wide, and so my overlap here should be just shy of the 3 inches, so that it will be taut and not too loose when we go to actually lay the binding flat after we've stitched our last bias seam here. And then I'm just going to trim that off. So I've got 1.5 inches to the right. And on the other strip, I'll bring the other strip going the other way. And I'm going to trim that at 1.5 inches to the left of my center mark. Center mark is there. 1.5 inches, just shy of 1.5 inches is what I want to do. That piece. There we go. So now I have my overlap that's overlapped just shy of 3 inches, which is the width of my binding straps. And then I can go back over to the machine to sew this together at an angle. So it's tight in here. So it's definitely a little bit of a challenge, but I've done this so many times that it becomes habit after a while. So I'm aiming again for that little V that's down here, going right across that top V, aiming for that little V. There we go. Got that. And now before I cut anything, I definitely want to bring back over to my workstation and make sure that it fits and there's no too big of an overlap. And you can see it does fit. If I lay it flat, you can see that it looks great flat like that. So I will trim it now at 1/4 inch with my big scissors here. And not 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. I'm used to my 1/4 inches, but this is a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Again, we're doing that at 1/2 inch because this is a quilt, a rug, it's floor canvas, that will go through a lot of people maybe walking on it, a lot of laundering. So you want this, you don't want anything popping on it. So that's why we have more seam allowance on that one. And the stitch itself is a shorter stitch length for that reason also. Okay, so we've got that. I'm going to just close up that gap now, stitching at that 1/2 inch. Bring the needle down, the foot down. And we'll just sew right along that gap that we've now closed. Got my tool here. I'm almost closed. Just force that a little bit, and we are good to go. Okay, so that's the first step of stitching down the binding. Now the next step is actually just flipping it to the back, and then we're going to do a, so we're going to actually change on the machine our foot Do I have the screwdriver? Yes. So I'm going to take off the shank and the A-foot here. And I'm going to actually put on a foot that has feed dogs. And it has a, if you can see it, it has, so it's called the SD, so stitch in the ditch foot. So it's got the guide right down the center. So that's going to be very helpful for me to stitch right down the center of that, the ditch. You'll see that in a moment, but let's put that on. So I do have a little hook here that I want to hook into the back. I'll be doing a straight stitch right down the middle of where the guide is for my stitch in the ditch. So what I wanted to show you was 2 different ways to do this. I mean, you could have myriad different ways of doing this, but so I can start here at the same place where I started to begin with, which was 2/3 of the way down the bottom. And so I'm going to be working on the back now, just to show you what I'm doing. So I'm pulling that binding around to the back. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to be able to just cover that stitch that I just made with that binding. And so if I want to be super accurate, you want to just go right over the edge of it and have it even. You could either use this glue, which is a fabric glue, and just dab it down a little bit every so often and just make sure it's staying in place. That's one way you can do it. Another way you could do this is to do clips. So you could clip along. And so we would be sewing from the front. So I would put the flat side towards the back on the clips and the colored side towards the front, because we're going to actually sew in the ditch on the front of the quilt here. Okay, so I've got my clips around a corner. I'm just going to show you a corner, and then I'm going to go ahead and finish all the way around, and then I'll show you what the finished product looks like. So here I am at the machine. I'm going to get my project underneath the presser foot. Oops, I'm going to remove that first clip. So I'm going to put the guide right in that ditch. So it's like the binding becomes a hill, and the valley is that ditch right there. So we're trying to sew right into the valley where the guide is going to go right along that edge there. And then the needle will penetrate, in theory, the needle penetrates right in that ditch. So we want to just keep going around. And so I'll show you what that looks like first. And then I'll just keep on going after that and show you the end. So here we go. Let's start our project here. Whoops, get rid of the first clip. See how this is so smooth and so precise. So here we are coming up to a corner. We're going to go right over the edge of that corner. And we're going to penetrate right at the ditch around the corner and then turn the corner. One more stitch it looks like I need to go. So I'll go one more. Okay. And that's how precise this machine is. It will let me just do one stitch at a time, which is great. And then now we just go forward. Oh, right. Lower the presser foot. It just told me to lower my presser foot. I was not concentrating on that detail. Okay, so here we are. Stitching right in that ditch. And we just keep taking our clips out one by one. So I'm going to keep doing that, and I will see you when the project is complete, and we'll show you a finished product. Okay, so I have stitched on the binding of this beautiful floor canvas all the way around, and looks great. It's tone on tone, so you can't really notice it very much, so it's great. Sturdy sturdy binding, and that will go right on the floor in the sewing room or in the hallway going to the sewing room. So just one more project done. On to the next. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next week. Don't forget, if you're in the market for a beautiful and very reasonably priced Janome sewing machine or any sewing machine, please come and see us, and we'd love to show you this Continental M17 machine. It's a sewing and embroidery machine. It does beautiful quilting, sewing, and it has a wonderful piercing power, great lighting, great space, wonderful machine overall. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you for watching.